Galactic date 20XX. At the far reaches of space lies a planet on the brink of ruin. The planet's name? Kopai. Due to a booming population, booming appetites, and a basic lack of planning, Kopai's inhabitants have all but exhausted their food supply. Their only hope is to find another planet with edible matter. Accordingly, they send unmanned scout vessels called Sparrows out into space. To their dismay, the search is proving fruitless. Just as they're about to give up, the final vessel reports back with news of a miraculous discovery. They mobilize to investigate the planet, which they name PNF 404. Kopai's last hope rests on 3 intrepid explorers.
Oh good, we actually have proper motivation to return to PNF 404 this time. Granted, it's with new characters, but anything's better than going there for debt. So Pikmin 3 has 2 tutorial areas this time around, one more for story purposes, but both for gameplay purposes. And just like Pikmin 1 and 2, they get across everything you need to know about growing and using Pikmin well. Though I will say, when you build bridges using piles of wood, the Pikmin will always return to the spot the pile was, even when there's no more pieces left. And that gets annoying over time. You can catch them with the whistle before they get there, but that's not always possible in every scenario, so yeah. The end-of-day diary entries return from Pikmin 1, and they're just as enjoyable as in that game. Plus, with all 3 characters you can play as, each one that happens to write the diary entry that night has their own little flair to add. Time to talk about graphics again, and holy shit, this game is beautiful! I know Pikmin technically skipped out on the Wii with Pikmin 1 and 2 only getting ported, but damn, how do we go from this to this to this in only 3 games? The only remotely not so great thing about the graphics is the Pikmin models look a little too shiny, but aside from that, this game is never going to age. You gotta give the Wii U credit. It may not have been as powerful as the PS4 or Xbox One, but at its best, it could certainly pull its own weight. Carrying over from Pikmin 2 is the ability to control 2 and eventually 3 captains, and they fine-tuned it to almost perfection. Not only is there co-op in the main campaign now, but you can also throw captains across gaps and have them travel to a set point with smaller squads of Pikmin. It is a little awkward having to throw a captain before being able to switch to them, and they all share the same whistle instead of having unique whistles, but those are largely minor things. Plus, once you get another captain, you can engage in conversations before each day. They're not much, but they expand on each captain's character. So remember how Pikmin 2 introduced 2 new Pikmin and one was a neat addition while the other was broken as f***? Well, those 2 were shoved into the mission mode to make way for the 2 new Pikmin, and this time, both are equally useful. Starting off with the Rock Pikmin, these guys pack a punch, can break glass barriers, and are helpful with killing the new Scuttle Chuck enemies, with the only drawback being that they don't latch onto enemies. They just land a big hit and roll. A great addition. The other new type is the Winged Pikmin, and while these guys are debatably the weakest Pikmin, they have their uses as well. They can carry objects over bodies of water, and are great at handling flying enemies. They don't do much damage to other enemies, but they're not useless at all. Although, to detour to the other types, I feel like this game makes some very small, yet weird changes in an attempt to make me like yellows more. Let me explain. Bomb rocks return as useful items, but now all Pikmin can use them rather than just being exclusive to yellows. What's more, with whites being absent from the story, all Pikmin can now dig up buried fruit, and for some reason they made yellows the fastest diggers? And okay, to be fair, yellows still have their legitimate uses through their immunity to electricity and occasional puzzles involving powering up a light source. But not only has electricity been nerfed to only immobilize any non-yellows rather than kill them, but said puzzles are both few and far between and as simple as throw a bunch of them on the wire. On top of that, they're the first type you're introduced to instead of the usual reds. Granted, you can't keep that group of yellows for story reasons, but still, it's weird that they tried this hard to make yellows seem better than they are. I know in Pikmin 1 they were more situational than anything, but Pikmin 2 had them down almost perfectly. All these little additions come off as trying too hard for no reason. Thankfully, not all the new tweaks are like this. The rest of them include, but are not limited to, refined type switching so you don't accidentally use a type you don't want, a charge attack that helps for taking down barriers and bomb rushing enemies, a lock-on, finally, and merging all the individual onions into one giant onion after they're found. It's the little things, you know? Oh yeah, red spray also returns from Pikmin 2. It's not as easy to grind as it is in that game, but it's still useful for dealing with harder enemies, even if I didn't use it that often. Was that? Where's the purple spray? Oh, don't worry about that. Let's talk collectibles. Pikmin 1 had ship parts, Pikmin 2 had treasures, and Pikmin 3 has fruit. All sorts of fruit, really, from the same fruit we collected in Pikmin 2 to entirely new fruit. The new ones are even given their own unique names, while the old ones keep their original names. And while none of them get as funny as the names in Pikmin 2, there are still some fun ones, like naming a watermelon a Crimson Banquet, naming a lime a Zest Bomb, naming a raspberry a Juicy Gaggle, and naming a lemon a Face Wrinkler. The fruit also factors into this game's attempt at a time limit. You technically have an unlimited amount of days to find all the fruit and parts for your ship, unless you run out of juice gained from the fruit you collect. This sounds like a cool concept, but in practice, it feels too generous. You'd think that needing more juice to get more days would be a good reason to not waste time, but after like 3 to 5 days of diligent fruit collecting, you'll have more juice than you'll ever need. Maybe it's because I've gotten really good at playing Pikmin, but the only times I ever felt pressed to get more juice was during the first few days when I had very little to start with, and at the halfway point where Louie stole all the juice I had, the grief. Everywhere else, while I still had good enough reason to collect fruit to save Kopai from starvation, it didn't feel that much tension, if you know what I mean. Looking at this trilogy, I've noticed that the areas tend to be somewhat middling. In Pikmin 1, they were just fine with only one being kind of irritating, and in Pikmin 2, 2 of them were straight up reused maps from Pikmin 1, with the others just being okay. Pikmin 3 kind of follows suit in this trend, but I do gotta give it credit for having all original areas based on the 4 seasons. No reused maps here, folks. With the caves being removed entirely, Pikmin 3 has specific spots for bosses and mini-bosses. Most of the mini-bosses aren't anything to write home about, but the times where the Shaggy Longlegs pops up is honestly worse than Pikmin 1's Beady Longlegs. At least the Beady Longlegs had only one spot you had to attack, and the Stompy feat could be avoided with practice. Here, you can't just attack the body. No. You gotta give it a haircut first by attacking the balls of hair on its legs, which is so unnecessary and opens up the opportunity to lose more Pikmin than you ever would normally. The bosses, meanwhile, are legit the best ones in the series so far. They get their own unique arenas, and they're quite the spectacle by Pikmin standards. Starting with the Armor Maw-Dad, it's a great first boss. It's simple to understand and gives Rock Pikmin a chance to shine. Perfect for the types you're given at the start. Also, I gotta hand it to the boss team for being a good bop. It's not amazing or anything, but it sets the mood for each fight that's not the final boss. The next boss in the lineup is the Behemoth Fozbat. This one's interesting because it's not as simple as just throwing Pikmin onto it. Around the caves are light bulbs that you need to use yellow Pikmin to light up, specifically when it comes near them, and when it does, it'll be vulnerable for a bit. It'll even summon normal Fozbats at half health. Really creative use for yellows. After that, you get the Sand-Belching Mirror Slug, and while this one is probably my least favorite, it's still a good boss. Bomb rocks are the start this time around, as you're recommended to use them when it attempts to suck you in, especially when the inhale radius engulfs the whole arena. It's a pretty standard fight outside of that, but props to giving bomb rocks a bit more creative use. Sidetracking a bit, the Picklopedia returns, and all the enemies you kill have their own notes, from Alf, Brittany, and Charlie, the 3 explorers you control, with Louie and Olimar joining in once you save them later in the game. Alf, being the engineer, talks about how the enemies are biologically structured. Brittany, being the botanist, talks about their aesthetics mainly. She also has some notes about all the fruit you collect, and some of them imply that she has romantic feelings for Alf. Interesting. Charlie, the main captain, speaks about his experience killing them, Louie is still on about how he would cook them all, and Olimar has his usual scientific remarks. Still as great as before. After receiving a transmission from Louie, you gotta save him from the Scornet Maestro. It uses Scornets to dive bomb you and your Pikmin, and the formations are a spinning drill, or bee stinger I guess, fighter airplane formations, and a circular formation. That last one can be annoying since it takes away half your Pikmin if you can't get out, but for the most part, the fight's still fun. Plus it gives winged Pikmin their turn in the spotlight.
저고 싶다고 빤네요. 돈은 양도 요한테.
Caio, orimas tak joy. Mekanin zuksu am soha captain tak joy.
Why?
See guys, I told you, Louie is a villain. Alpha and Company saved his ass and he responds with stealing all their supplies and running off. That's a villain, guys, and a f***ing hilarious one at that. And to get him back, you gotta fight the Quaggle Meyerclops. The fight isn't that complex, just keep your non-blues away from the water, use your Pikmin on the legs to make it fall over, break the fruit at the top out of its crystal, and go to town on it while making sure to keep your Pikmin away from the tongue. Nothing too complex, but I will say that this thing is massive. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the biggest creature in the whole Pikmin series, and taking it down feels like you're toppling a titan. Great sense of scale. So do you guys remember how great the submerged castle was in Pikmin 2? Well, if any of you ever asked, if the submerged castle was so great, why isn't there a submerged castle 2? Well, guess what? Pikmin 3 asked that same question and made one in the form of the formidable oak, home of the Plasm Wraith. Basically, Olimar got captured by the Plasm Wraith while looking for treasures, and you gotta escort him out of the formidable oak with the Plasm Wraith in hot pursuit. The tension here is almost on the same level as the submerged castle. Brittany is the one leading the Pikmin carrying Olimar, so you gotta clear the way of enemies and barriers while also keeping Brittany away from the Plasm Wraith. Granted, that much isn't too hard since all you need to do is make Brittany run in circles until the way is clear, but there's still plenty of tension as the day is still progressing as you do all of this. And the oak is so big that you're never going to be able to get out in a single day. It'll take multiple days for you to accurately clear a path for Brittany and the Pikmin. And that music is eerie as easily on the same level as the submerged castle, and it gets even more tense when the Wraith closes in on Olimar. But guess what? All of that was merely a prelude to the final boss, the Plasm Wraith itself. And this thing does not go down easily. You gotta use every single Pikmin type, or just 100 rock Pikmin, to break this thing down into pieces and then destroy those pieces, either by attacking it normally or destroying the cubes it spits out with specific types of Pikmin. Meanwhile, the Wraith will try to impale your Pikmin and even take to the skies for more mobility, requiring you to use your winged Pikmin to knock it down. Don't be surprised if you need to retry the fight, cause you'll need to bring your A game. And on top of that, this is the one Pikmin boss in the whole series that you don't kill. All of your effort to save Olimar only results in making it back off. Even the Water Wraith was killed at the end of the submerged castle. Fantastic final boss. And to accompany it, it's got a great final boss theme. It mixes the eeriness of this eldritch horror with the climactic feeling of this final battle. I'm not sure if I prefer the Titan Dweebles theme or this one, but either way, it's a great theme through and through. So there are two versions of Pikmin 3 currently out there. The original Pikmin 3 for the Wii U and Pikmin 3 Deluxe, the Switch port released in 2020. I played Pikmin 3 Deluxe for this video, and the new content made to justify the Deluxe part of the title is prologue and epilogue content called Olimar's Assignment and Olimar's Comeback respectively. Just what is this new content all about, you ask? Well, they basically made Pikmin 1 and 2 wear a trench coat and shoved them into the game. No, seriously, Olimar's Assignment is Olimar and Louie searching for treasure on PNF 404 again, because Hakate Freight got into debt again, and Olimar's Comeback is Olimar and Louie trying to rebuild their crashed ship after Alpha Company worked so hard to save them. Okay, at this point, I know Pikmin isn't a game series with the most brilliant storytelling ever, but come on! You really had to reuse the plot of the first two games in order to justify the prologue and epilogue content? Don't get me wrong, the content itself, gameplay-wise, isn't bad, but when the story is this laughably poor, it makes you wonder what the point even is. But I do like the opening mission logs for Olimar's Assignment. They're charming, and it's funny to see Louie get beaten up by the wildlife. That's the one good part of the prologue story. There's also mission mode, which is exactly what it says it is, and all the missions aren't anything noteworthy. What is noteworthy is how they treated the purple Pikmin. The whites remain the same as ever, but the purples received a major overhaul. Remember how I complained about how broken they were in Pikmin 2? Well, someone at Nintendo thought it was a good idea to fix the purples by completely breaking them. They don't stun enemies anymore, their homing is straight up broken even when using the lock-on, and the damage they do is pitiful. Purples literally went from the best Pikmin ever to damn near useless outside of their ability to lift more weight than a normal Pikmin, which is the only thing that remains intact. Guys, the purples being broken in Pikmin 2 was a legitimate problem, but that doesn't mean the solution is going in the opposite direction in the next game. Limiting them to mission mode probably would have been enough already. Why did you need to do all this? The last new thing that Pikmin 3 Deluxe adds is badges, which are basically in-game achievements. There are badges for the story, mission mode, side stories, bingo battle, a two-player battle mode that's just there, and special dedicated badges. One such badge that I want to mention is the Pikmin Master Badge. This is earned by beating the story on Ultra Spicy difficulty, which is unlocked by beating the story on Hard difficulty, which was my default playthrough. Now, I wouldn't say that Pikmin 3 is a particularly challenging game outside of the bosses, even on hard difficulty, but Ultra Spicy difficulty does change some things that do make for a challenging experience, such as getting less juice from the fruits you collect, lowering the max amount of Pikmin you can have in the field from 100 to 60, and having Pikmin drown faster in the water. Small things, but nonetheless important things that make for an interesting second playthrough. Still the easiest Pikmin game so far, but it's nice to have that extra challenge. When playing the previous games, I figured that Pikmin was going to be this little series that I liked but never loved. I definitely liked Pikmin 1 enough to give it another go in the future, but didn't really care for Pikmin 2 all that much. So I figured the same would hold true for Pikmin 3. Boy was I wrong. It may have taken a decade's worth of releases, but I've finally found a Pikmin game that I genuinely love. It may not be one of my favorite games ever or anything, but I genuinely had a great time with Pikmin 3. Granted, I did experience some burnout towards the end of the completionist part, but playing it the way most people do, this is a great game. Easily the best one so far. I'm hoping the same holds true for Pikmin 4 when it releases, but before that, we're going to take a detour to Hey Pikmin, aka Pikmin 3.5. Most people don't or choose to not remember this little side game, including Nintendo by the way, and the few fans that do don't really like it because of how different it is from the other games. That possibly paints a rough picture for me, but it's part of the Pikmin canon, so I gotta complete it. See you next time, everybody!